Okay, namaste everybody. So we're doing Saturn in Pisces today. A little bit of Purva Bhadrapada, Uttara Bhadrapada, and Revati. And so most recently I've been looking at the Revati side of this and of course it's the last nakshatra and it's the last class and that's the beauty of sort of going through the cycles because we say hello and Saturn and I think this was like a 12-week course to begin with and we're probably on 12 months now. So I think I said I expected that when it began. And it really has helped me sort of shape the whole project and just sort of understand how I want to fill it out and get into the dasha periods of these people and the history side of it. Um, and so we're kind of at a point now where I'm thinking, oh, I like it now, actually. I got rid of a bunch of italics and all kinds of like crazy stuff that was just making it hard to read. Respace some things out. And that's all very Ravati, right? Finding that space in a sense of things. Um, and of course, I've been sort of sifting through all of the planets and all of the nakshatras of it. And so, anyway, so that's the nakshatra project. So it's just here. I just had it. Oh, where did it go? Anyways, I'll find it. It was just here. Project, there it is. So I'm going to share the nakshatra project page with you, and we'll start going that then. And also, it's kind of nice that Saturn is in. It's passing through these nakshatras. I should have looked. Is it back to Purva Bhadrapada right now? I think it was going to touch on that and then move forward again. It's still going retro for a while, I think, until till October. Anyways, I should be more on top of it. It's my class, but it's the way it goes sometimes. So, okay, here, let me share this screen with you then.
Right now, Saturn is in Uttara Bhadrapada, and I have it written down somewhere when the retrograde finishes. I forgot also. We are the worst astrologers
Yeah, well, it's like it's in the notes. I'm sure it's probably right here. Oh,
until it's retrograde in Pisces until 27th of November.
yeah, okay. Yeah. And this tells me it'll be more or less Uttara Bhadrapada for a couple years until February 27. That probably means going into Ravati and then coming back to Uttara Bhadrapada and then again moving. It was interesting in this one thing I didn't expect here. So James Bond came to life in all of this, and the first and the last Mission Impossibles were filmed during all of this. And who's that other fellow? Reacher, I think. Another big guy, just like goes around and fights everybody and saves the day. And so all of these things sort of came about. And I was kind of like, maybe it was a little bit of Uttara Bhadrapada, the underground side of it, but it was really this sort of person usually set out to reform the system, reform the CIA or reform the FBI or whatever these big things are going on. And it's funny because we have something similar to that going on now in the USA is big reform sense. Now, there seems to me to be quite a big shift in energy between, I'm not even looking at what I'm sharing with you guys. So, so there seems to be me a big shift in energy between Saturn in Uttara Bhadrapada and Saturn when it gets to Ravati. And Ravati really does seem to be where it's coming out of a lot of that muck that it got into. Ever since Capricorn, it's been quite harsh sense of realities. The masses, mass movements and things like that becoming strong, all of this. And so now as we go through Pisces, we're in a little bit of retrograde now. It's going to turn around and sort of cruise through for a little while. I guess it's going not going to cruise, but it's going to start going the other way. And So we're seeing a lot of things like realities and dreams are sort of being tested. Old dreams, old ideals, old ways of doing things. It's interesting that Pisces is eighth from Leo and sixth from Libra. And so these both have a lot to do with truth and trust and honor and all that is sort of good and holy and nice in the world in Leo, and then all that balance and harmony and on the other side. Of course, it's also aspecting across from it in Virgo, which is war. But what we're seeing is a lot of the um central systems start to break down, and there becomes a lot of sort of reformers and reformist movements in this. And so, anyways, yeah, it's all here, old responsibilities, a lot of these things. A lot of things with foreigners start to happen here. And this is a lot of work with foreigners, a lot of travel comes out of this, going away to foreign lands, to isolated places. If it's in the fourth house, it's kind of, I might bounce around a little bit here, but you see quite a poor, wet sort of house. If it's in the sixth house, you see something similar because it still rules the fourth. But that there's sort of more imbalance in the home and greater debts for the home and things like that. Mother has more troubles, but you see a lot of sort of like cold, wet, hard energies going on here. Of course, ashrams and hospitals and things like this. It's interesting. It's a very powerful place for spirituality, and we should want to see some names here. So we see our big guru, Dana Laxmanju. It's funny, he's the first name that I've got this sort of popping up here, and that's still in Purva Bhadrapada. And he might have been seen as a cult leader in a sense. He had a very powerful son as well that had him speaking and talking at quite a young age. And then he went off on his own for quite a while into isolated settings and things like this. And then some of the scholars went to meet him. Mark, I just read something about Mark, or I heard it anyways. 1976 is when he met Swami Laxmanju. And anyways, I thought, oh, jeepers, that's when I was born in 1976. And so I like these kind of coincidences. So anyways, we get these great gurus, Carl Wenke, Isaac Newton, get a lot of dreamers, but they're bringing dreams to reality. We had in the other side, like a lot of the first light bulbs came out in this period through Uttara Bhadrapada, especially, I think, but it probably bleeding on the other side. But a lot of lines, like power lines and street lights got put up and cable cars got first used and sort of all these lines got laid all over the world. It's quite remarkable when you think of how much like it's like you look at these pictures of India, right, which is power lines and big messes of it. And in a sense, that's what the underground looks like as well. There's lines all over the place down there. And used to work underground, and it's it's insane. You have no idea what you're going to dig up. And in a sense, there's a lot of that underground energy coming out of, especially Purva Bhadrapada, Uttara Bhadrapada. It's like coming out of this crypt energy, this what is it? It's working with the paradoxes, is what they're starting to work with in that Purva Bhadrapada. And then when it moves into the Pisces thing, a lot of those past realities really start to fade away. And so Swami Laxmanju and what he was teaching with Kashmiri Shaivism was essentially magic. And so half the world says, oh, that's hocus pocus, it's not real at all. And the other half says, oh wow, magic is real. Let's dive into this. And what he meant by magic, I think, was just awe and wonder and wow. And so Saturn, I think, is starting to take this side of things quite seriously in Pisces. Really taking that paradox seriously in Purva Bhadrapada, really taking those lines of connections that are sort of like, well, those lines, if we're thinking power lines, are connecting to a power source and running that power source universally, sort of, you could say, right? Every home now has power and electricity, and it's become a very universalized thing. And so in a way, this is also like a lot of the energy here, like the post-impressionist painters, that post energy, that after energy, um, they're kind of doing away with the old and really bringing something, new electrical systems, new power systems, new ways that power is distributed. And when we get to Pisces, I think it's really becoming a universal sort of distribution. One of the funny things I think, so we've got like Swami Lakshmanju dealing with this paradox of Shiva and Shakti on the one end, but when we look on the bottom end, we get Daisy and Violet Hilton, a couple Siamese twins, really working with that paradox of this, and so I found this things quite interesting and quite sort of something to think about. Now, once we get to Uttara Bhadrapada, we get much more into that Saturn energy because ruled by Saturn now. Or Purva Bhadrapada was still sort of that expanse of that, almost that first light, the crack of the door. And there almost seems to be in Uttara Bhadrapada almost stepping into this murkiness, which is almost like stepping into a darkness in a sense. And so we get guys like Joseph Stalin, we get great industrialists, Ratan Tata, geochemistry. We get a lot of geochemists actually here, a few of them anyways, working with this sort of thing. So a lot of the Saturn's really taking, I think there's almost a sense of, you get this in other nakshatras, but almost a sense of serum in this, right? That murkiness, that and we're getting that now with the vaccine, right? Everybody knew all of this, but now they're saying it's coming to light, right? All these sort of things about the vaccine and this sort of stuff. And so there's a lot of things that do sort of they pass through this murkiness of Uttara Bhadrapada, and Revati really starts to shine a light on those things, and they really start to come out. And I saw it through the historical side of things where Saturn really through Pisces is bringing a sort of collective karmas, collective punishment to a certain degree, a collective sort of cleansing is going on here. Um, One of the interesting examples here, and is Mike Tyson, I suppose you could say, in the personal realm of that. It's Mike Tyson, of course, he's a brutal fighter, one of the most brutal boxers, fighters that ever lived. He he was charged with rape. He went to prison for that, came out, became a heavyweight champion again, more brutal than he's ever been. But he's sort of become like a wise old man in this stage. And that was something that came out a lot in the personal charts was people who sort of did make a lot of mistakes when they were younger and really learned from them if they were able to make it that long. People like Kurt Cobain don't make it that long. Again, that was a heroin addiction, a sort of serum type addiction. Um, this sort of thing. There's a something about them that's almost beyond reality in a lot of these cases, or in the case of like geochemist and drug addiction sort of things of that fantasy sort of has a harsh reality side to it, you might say. So we get these kind of things. Joseph Stalin, Saddam Hussein is there. Alan Pinkerton, who is a detective who basically started the FBI in a way, but that was a lot of strike breaking and a lot of sort of heavy-handed stuff going on there, much like Saddam Hussein's secret police or Stalin's secret police or these kind of things. Um, so you had some of this kind of interesting stuff. This Abraham Maslow, his hierarchy of needs, I've actually got him listed down below. George Carlin is here too. Very, how can you say, very sarcastic, very sort of dry in his humor. Um, this kind of thing. Herman Melville, Moby Dick, he has an interesting life because he did go whaling at a young age, jumped off the whale ship in some like island, lived with some natives, caught another ship here and another ship there, and made his way back to America um, when he was quite young. And so again, that foreign nature thing, we see this all the time when Saturn is someone's 12th house. It can be long periods of isolation. One of the things I noticed in and fourth house seems to be coming to me a lot. I found it really interesting. Was people just living like, even if they don't go away to a foreign place, they sort of live set back in the community. Their house might be set back in the lot. There's sort of a darkness, a veil between them and the community. They might have some deep sort of shame or something. Like we saw one guy who was he was one of the Nazi war criminals still living in Germany. His Saturn period came after World War II in the next 20 years after that, or 19 years after that. And he stayed living in Germany, but he sort of like hid away from everybody, and there was some shame he was kind of hiding. So those sorts of things were interesting. Um, and Herman Melville, I wonder even how much Moby Dick, he talked about like wrote in the savages and the wild, sort of, and some of these different characters, very, very foreign characters for his time and that sort of thing. Jean Cabot, Cabot, cartoonist. He was one of the Charlie Hobo cartoonists that was killed in that terrorist attack. Very similar sort of humor, I imagine, as George Carlin, but maybe going more religious, more spiritual. One name that I find very interesting, Maria Josepha Dauphiny, mother of three kings. And so I don't know if that was a lot of responsibility for foreign diplomacy or these kind of things coming up her path, but quite interesting. No doubt the mother was quite good at her role and behind the scenes, even where Saturn tends to take all of that much more seriously. So we get other sort of George Washington, Peter the Great. We start to get into like Einstein, Hunter S. Thompson, really like defining new sciences in a lot of ways. There was, and I think this has come up in other places. Maybe I'm just looking at it too deeply, but there does seem to be some nuclear scares that come up with this, and some nuclear accidents and some sort of near misses. And we see Einstein and some other, who's some of the other guys, we'll see his name. Anyways, there's some other guys that were heavily involved in the research of the atom and understanding quantum physics and things like this as well. Quantum physics, of course, tying to Swami Lakshman-Jew's work that we're working with. So a lot of interesting stuff with Saturn throughout Pisces. So, and again, a lot of these firsts, like George Washington was sort of wiping away the old sort of colonial rule. There is a lot of this, I think, revolts overseas and even hidden kind of wars that start to come to light. Like I think of someone like George Washington, and that was like there was a lot of free speech movement in his time there as well. But I don't think the British government quite expected the Americans to be so well organized and to fight back so well and to do what they did. And so he was sort of a rebel, I guess, from the British point of view. He would have been probably seen like, I don't know, probably seen like someone like Joseph Stalin, or they probably would have scapegoated him. Anyway, so we get this, we get Frederick Engels. So it's interesting to see the opposite between the, I don't know, to Republican or to the Democratic way and the more communist way. So it doesn't seem to distinguish between those, which is better. But what Saturn is doing is bringing up new ways of being and new ways of sort of moving forward. And to some degree, I did see this in regards to like currency markets and things like this. And this more seemed to be a dissolution again of those central banking systems. Some of the, anyways, some of the gold systems and things like that started to collapse through the Saturn transits. So yeah, we get these kind of like Wailing Jennings was doing like outlaw country. What's the other fellow? He was doing the Gonzo journalism. Even George Carlin did kind of a grievance sort of comedy. Where are these people? Anyways, so there is sort of this like the outsiders who become mainstream to a certain degree. And I think in this period, they're still kind of, a lot of them are the ones who are still sort of tearing down the old to some degree. Herman Melville was interesting because I was trying to look at sort of energy markets and things like this, and he was writing about um, kind of arguing against the whale oil system. And so it's kind of funny because we're having that same big debate about the oil in the world. And in a sense, the kind of oil that we're pumping from the ground actually replaced the whale oil. And so it was sort of a solution to whaling to a certain degree. And so it fixed a lot of the old problems and started sort of new problems, a new cycle, right? And so we're still trying to sort of figure that out. And I think we're at a point now where, again, once again, we're going to start to look at that. And I do, anyways, I think there's been more power has started to, what can you say, new power systems start to take root in this period. And so I don't know what that'll be at this moment, but we'll see. Um, and even like new psychological movements, some of these new spiritual movements. Again, these are movements that were probably all once sort of thought of as all very, very progressive. And then anyway, some of the more uninformed, unrealistic voices start to fade away, and it's almost a filtering starts to happen through here. And we end up with I don't know, the most realistic is what Saturn's looking, the most realistic dream, the most realistic fantasy, the myth that everybody will believe, the new myth of the masses. And the new myth making really, I think, starts coming out in Revati more than Uttara Bhadrapada. There's still some murkiness between I don't know, maybe it's all the details and the universals. Anyways, here and so like at these powerful movements of behaviorism with Pavlov. I saw a few behaviorists had this. So a lot of sort of psychological theories sort of get tested, I think, is a big part of what Saturn also does and puts these things to the test. And they come out, someone like Hunter S. Thompson is gonzo journalism, really writing from the gutter in a sense. Uttara Bhadrapada, that sort of Saturn water. And Saturn is also going to make it dirty. So we get these sorts of things going on. Dustin Hoffman also with one of his early roles was sort of this autistic boy, that sort of murky, highly intelligent but misunderstood, I think might be a good way to describe a lot of these people. Somehow, and I think maybe it's because the aspect, yeah, because of the aspect on Sagittarius, perhaps. But a lot of them did sort of like break away from the more dogmatic systems. They started to make their own path to a certain degree here, and sort of not following the university. And a lot of them are sort of educated and they've got their knowledge through sort of testing it, through the experience of it. And now Pisces, they make it practical. So this was interesting. This fifth business. I need more of this in this document. Maybe I need to do another research project just on it. But fifth business, it was a novel. It was very influential for me when I was like, I don't know, 22 or 23 years old or something. And it starts with a very particular moment in time. And it's like this time on this date in this location. And it's sort of a fictional location, but everybody knows where it's actually set, a little part of Canada. And so I made that chart, and it's amazing because that novel starts with this boy, he puts the rock in a snowball and he throws it at the other boy, and the boy ducks and it hits a pregnant woman behind her. behind him. And the pregnant woman sort of goes mad, goes crazy, and goes into labor and has the child. And anyways, that child ends up growing to be the magician, sort of the great magician in the world, sort of thing. Really cool novel. It's a trilogy, actually. Anyways, but what it is, the boy who ducks is actually the one who holds on to all the guilt of that snowball. And he doesn't even find out until very, very late. He talks to the other boy about it much later. They're all grown up. And the other boy doesn't even remember it or claims not to remember it. And you're kind of, I can't remember when I sort of went back to the synopsis of it, I was kind of confused because even then, I'm not sure if it's clear whether he really doesn't remember or if he's just sort of like pretending not to face it. So there's a lot of this ambiguity as well, and Saturn tends to carry a lot of karma in Pisces that doesn't necessarily belong to you. And it's not like you don't kind of have to carry a lot of the karma you're carrying here. It's a lot of, again, kind of that collective karma, that universal karma, um, kind of coming, I don't know, because of your dream, because of imagination. And we see that a little bit like the Matrix, Lily Wachowski did this. And again, we're really working with that dream reality matrix out of the paradox, perhaps, of Falguni, and maybe Uttara Bhadrapada is more the matrix, um, or like that. Anyways, I make things up sometimes. So, um, someone like Donovan Bailey, I wonder. I'm pretty sure he's the runner or got into the clothing business after. So some of this sort of import export things and dealing with foreigners as well comes involved. Um, Cynthia Brazil, she was dealing with robotics. I imagine at this point of her career, she's probably really heavily invested in artificial intelligence as well because they really go together. And of course, artificial intelligence and even if we think of cryptocurrencies and some of these things that are like, is it really real? Is it like, what is that? Is it like real intelligence? Is it not? And I think we're starting to figure out with AI anyways, it's a lot of pattern recognition and it reads the internet really, really well. It just reads everything and spits it back out to us. And a lot of times it just sort of feeds our own bias as well, which is, again, I don't know, maybe one of those paradoxes we get into when we start contemplating Shaivism and these questions of who am I? And we just keep coming up against our own bias, maybe. Um, Something like that, and making our own reality. And what is this reality? And jeepers, I was just talking about time being an illusion and the quantum physics of all of this, and so it's all very like it just fits with all the Saturn Pisces, Saturn Uttara Bhadrapada themes, and all of that. So now when we get to Revati, well, it's pretty true up above, but when we get to Revati, I just it jumps out at me. Some pretty tough dudes have this Saturn. Vin Diesel, Joe Rogan, Sonny Barger, the founder of Hell's Angels, Gian Gomeshi, also known for his handiwork, you might say. Um, and so, anyways, some sort of tough dudes. But then you get someone like Ramana Maharishi. And this was an interesting sort of case study because, anyways, I ended up rectifying it like I always do. But a big part of what he did was sort of this action and inaction. And sort of he's just like sat there on stage in meditation and man of very few words and very direct and sharp by other combinations and things like this. But he was sort of also like he was sort of self-taught. He kind of went against a lot of the other traditions by bringing a lot of foreigners in. And again, that foreign connection really came into him as well. And so this was also quite interesting. He lived where was his Saturn? Where did I end up putting it? Anyways, he also lived where he was living on a Arunachala mountain in the south. India was right around the cremation grounds as well. And so it was very much a sort of, I want to call it a Varanasi setting, but this sort of place of death, a place of dissolution. And so he took that dissolution very, very seriously. Um, some of the problem we get with that dissolution of the Saturn is someone like Stalin, who also took dissolution very, very seriously. And I shouldn't laugh, right? Because that ended up costing all kinds of lives. And sort of it can sort of swing different ways, this Saturn is all I'm saying. Um, yeah, there's some Alice in Chains singers. A lot of people sort of dealing with, I think they're dealing with a lot of isolation, dealing with a lot of grief in their lives. I think it's very, very easy for a sense of resentment to start to come into this Saturn. One thing we get when Saturn's in the 12th house oftentimes is a person feels a bit like a stranger to some degree because it's very easy, and I've said this before, it's very easy for us to get sort of confused into who we are, especially with the 12th house, the first house, and the second house. And that's most of our confusion in life is who am I between these three things? Because sometimes we think, oh, I am that Saturn outsider. I'm that karmic baggage that I'm carrying, where actually you're just carrying that baggage. It's not who you are. Anyway, so it kind of we get these sort of confusions with Saturn and 12th house and so like that. So we also get again some of these outcasts or whatever sort of normalizing the outer path. So we get even like Michael Kirkby, who was a gay judge. I think he was an Australian judge, and didn't come out as gay until he was judge. I don't know if it's one of those cases where everybody already kind of knew anyways or not, but that happened. Get a lot of like SS police and police chiefs and police nationalists here as well. People sort of doing a lot of dirty jobs in this to a certain degree. And I think like Saturn and Pisces is quite cold and quite wet and quite it's sort of dissolving those karmas. It's working on them. It's giving like what they sort of classically say is foreign service, right? And so foreign service is a place where you really don't get any. I don't know if you've ever like I haven't done much of it, I guess a bit of it, but I've mostly talked to a lot of people who have like worked NGOs in India and things like this. And okay, a lot do have a very nice time, but a lot sort of feel like, oh, it's an organization and nobody cares and nobody really around here actually wants to help. And there becomes a lot of sort of like where is there's nobody organizing anything to a certain degree. And so these people, I think, tend to think that, I think they tend to end up trying to organize to some degree. We see Morse code even trying dots and dashes and organize all of that into something with meaning. Again, with the Morse code, it started getting used a lot on the telegraph, which were some of the early like telegraph lines getting laid out and all of this sort of stuff. Um, it's interesting we get like a singer like Celine Dion has this, and what was that other? She also has an incredibly beautiful voice, like Sarah McLachlan. And so it's interesting that we get these sort of singers again, very almost ethereal voice. And I don't know where Jesus, just slip out of my mind like that, these people. Celine Dion, oh, look, they're both Canadians. Um, so I don't know if that's some of the isolation I talk about in Canada. And do they both live up there? No, Celine Dion lives in the Swiss mountains, I think. And the other one she lived in Tofino where I lived. And it was again very isolated place. How she was stayed away from the community. Even there in the village, she sort of set herself back a little bit and travels continuously for work and working on different music projects, but sort of stays a bit hidden back in the bush. And I think if I wasn't correct, like she came to a Saturn period recently and I thought, oh, she's going to get the heck out of Tofino and move like to some place that's actually isolated now because Tofino is not really isolated anymore. So you get that kind of energies as well, trying to get away from everything, trying to leave, I don't know, like the 12th house is trying to get away from your own self, ultimately, everything that reminds you of your own self. And so this can be well, this can be very good for tapas. It can be very good for meditation. Take meditation very seriously, right? Take all of this kind of thing very seriously. And if there's good aspects, or if Jupiter or Venus are aspecting the Saturn, then you're more likely to get a good result in that isolation. Like I'm sure someone like I think it's Sarah McLaughlin. It was in Tofino. Anyways, you take someone like her, and she probably has a Venus that's aspecting that Saturn because it's such a beautiful place. Maybe there's even some Ketu attached because it's sort of a mystical place, and there's always this fog going in, and even the close to the ocean where you look off into a like a nothingness. And and behind you is actually a very good image of that, this dark, shadowy shapes, hard to make out, especially in the darker window anyway. So um it's too bright behind me, but maybe even that's a kind of a dissolution, but you've got the Saturn filter sort of on it there. So um so this kind of thing. A lot of them too are sort of a lot of them can be very, very compassionate people. And that comes through some of these singers as well. Even Molly Ringwald and some of the actresses that have this sort of very compassionate. They might be working with people like refugees, they might be working with foreigners. They anyways might it's a foreign service classical placement as well, Saturn in 12th house. So doing some of this kind of work, just working with using their compassion in a serious way to help people, you could say. Um, so let's get into this somewhere. Okay, so here we are, Saturn in the first house. And so this is on Swami Lakshmanju's moon. And so this really good for like getting away from people because the moon is also in Pisces and Purva Bhadrapada. And so quite comfortable, isolated, although it's a long, slow sort of burn to some degree. Um, And really, that sort of wisdom, like I look at someone like Morgan Freeman, who's becoming like the wise old man kind of figure. Even Swami Laxmanju, I think, was a little bit more of a young upstart when he was young, and sort of got away and went away from everything and sort of found his balance or the balance between the opinions that were going on in Kashmir at this time. So we get another outsider. Brian Mulroney is an interesting name to see here. He was a little bit like Trump. He was a businessman that came into politics, and so again, that outsider who came inside and really sort of cleaned up a lot of things in Canadian politics, but also had a lot of his own problems and scandals and his was to do with airline, I think. Anyways, moving a bunch of money into airlines. But again, this sort of follows a bit of a whistleblower kind of anyways, hidden things coming to light, you might say. Sonny Barger, even of Hell's Angels, a lot of his connections really came to light, and even though it was such a secret sort of society, it it sort of also came to light that way. Yogis, TKV Deskacharya, the son of another great yogi. Anyways, but he was trained as an engineer and took things a little bit too seriously to a certain degree. Very, very structured in his practice. And I think there's a lot of like I found this. We'll see what happens here. I found this a lot. I think it was in third house when Saturn was there, was really giving this sort of a clubhouse feel to things. Was it this? Da, da, da. Anyways, no, okay. So okay, this was fourth house. The fourth house, one of the interesting things was this is a lot of times it became a little bit like a clubhouse. Like quite literally in Rama Maharishi's time, it was a cave he was living in, and people would like just go hang out at Maharishi's cave because Well, it was like just kind of became the place to be in a sense. And so I think it was like I again I hate to compare Maharishi to Sonny Barger, but anyways, also this sort of clubhouse, this kind of man cave, very dirty in the fourth house, Saturn, dirty, wet, probably moldy, things like this. When we see the transits, we see a lot of like waterborne illnesses coming through this Saturn and things like that. And so these kind of things as well. And so probably not the cleanest places. Maharishi was also living like on the burning grounds, on cremation grounds as well. And so just not a very like healthy, hygienic sort of a place to be. Um, Kind of a not a very fertile place, you might say. You say that, but then anyways, we get Maharishi from there. We get the Hells Angels from there. We get George Washington had it. Lucien Bicard's separatist movement. I believe he lived near a cemetery. Lucien Bichard, his residence in Quebec. Um, Something very sacrilegious about this, perhaps as well, because we get Carla Van Ray, God's call girl, who has this. Um, And even Maharishi was very sort of left-hand path in a lot of ways. In an early sort of form, he was quite left-hand path in his path. He didn't say much. Silence. Who am I? You know, like just a very, very basic message. And and other sides of him could be quite sharp. They say a lot of his messages, like you just fire somebody a look sort of idea, and they would get the sense of that. And so some of this, maybe that's that third Lord kind of communication, cold and harsh, and keeps everybody kind of in line to a certain degree, almost a gang mentality, or maybe a bit of a tribal mentality coming through that to a certain degree. Sorry, Maharishi. I really like Maharishi, by the way, but I really like Hell's Angels too. So whatever, I guess I like this energy. It used to be, it used to be different things. Um, Again, really for the people kind of thing. And we see someone like George Washington was like that. Even these separatist movements, and maybe that's the Saturn and fourth house, also bringing a degree of separation from the local culture. Going apart from, like I said earlier, even being set back and set aside and sort of treated different than the rest. And so that kind of thing. So this was this was again that fourth house, Saturn and Pisces, whether it rules the fourth house or it's in the fourth house, it's not good for the home life. It's not good for the early home life. There's a lot of being kicked out early, being sent away early. Even the Hells Angels started with this sort of grievance of the World War, of sort of Vietnam vets coming back to the USA and feeling like their government didn't care. Their government wasn't doing anything to help them. And so there was a lot of that sort of grievance and homeland kind of grievance, and even maybe home culture grievance going on there, like that. And so we see a lot of these people also, they got kicked out of the home early, or the parents weren't around the home, and it just became, even at a very early age, if they had Saturn periods, a lot of times it was that place to be. Someone like Dave Grohl here, it's in the fifth house, and so he was using it. I think it's some of that garage band energy coming through the fifth house. He used that like there was no parental supervision, and all the boys could just come, and it was a messy, dirty house, and they could hang out and just do whatever. And it sounds like his mother, the father left early, a lot of that sort of father leaving, going out of the life early, and these all these positions, and the mother sort of supported him in just learning music and studying music and that sort of thing. And I think we might have got this as well. And Francis Ford Coppola, I believe he had some illness when he was young, and so was again separated from his school and his local community and things like this. And he got into like puppetry and all this sort of imagination stuff, started to come out because of that early separation. Again, fourth house has a lot to do with our early kind of home life, early education. And so there's, to a certain degree, I want to say like home education. to some degree, but I don't know, maybe problems at school and different things coming up, but but learning on their own to some degree and learning maybe through trial and error as well. It was their early teacher. And yeah, and maybe that's sort of what helped someone like Mike Tyson turn his life around, is sort of realizing that he had a lot of responsibility in the spotlight. Later in life or early in life, he just took the spotlight and beat the hell out of people and was rude to women and all this. And I think as they grow older, they do sort of realize that there is some responsibility to their position, to their creativity, to their creation, to their whatever they're producing as well, and they become sort of responsible for that. And maybe it's also like children from the past that come up or something like this, and these kind of old responsibilities help to I don't know, in a lot of cases I think mellow a lot of these people out late in life if they make it late to life. So there we go, sent away from home, creative imagination, a bit depressed, really amount to much. They're not dumb, it just takes them a while to learn how to express themselves. They can have a bit of a dirty, pessimistic mind, prone to those depressive states. So again, they have to really work for it. They have to earn it. And I think that's some of that practice. They're just home alone and just going into their imagination and also taking it quite seriously and trying to build something out of it, build puppets out of it, build a band out of it, build robots out of it, these kind of different things. So, and I've heard that about Sarah McLachlan. Sarah McLachlan. Yeah. I always get these people mixed up. I just see these beautiful women with a nice voice, and I'm like, oh, they're the same. But anyways, the one that lives in Tofino, she's constantly practicing music. She's constantly refining. She's constantly at work at it. And so like this. But I think to another degree, this Saturn, like again, she's got a Saturn period coming up. They kind of go away from everything in those Saturn periods. Whether it's jail or prison in some cases, in Mike Tyson's case, they have to go away and sort of really reflect. Even oh God, this must have been a dream because I can't imagine where I could have read it. Um, it's Saturn Ravati. I can take my dream seriously. So I was even thinking about like the tapas side of this and having to go away from everything, and this sort of really hard tapas that the Agor does after, to get redemption and to sort of work away their sins. And to a certain degree, I think there is some of this energy in the Saturn and Pisces. They have to go away to suffer. They have to go away and sort of face the consequences of their actions to some degree. And so the agor is sort of like someone who does it, I don't know, I guess, well, their sin makes everybody chase them out of town, but they also go do it intentionally. And they say, okay, I'm going to go away. I'm going to live simple. I'm going to suffer. I'm not going to, fall for for my senses, sensual desires. And so I think to some degree, like we see these, again, these women very ethereal sort of singing, but then we also see these Ratan Tatas and these Stalins who really repressed a lot of that like sense of childhood joy and the I don't know, their dreams became very like this big kind of thing, and they tried to institute it and they just forgot about everybody else, and there was a loss of humanity sort of rang through in some of these cases. And so really, it can swing both ways. I don't know what Stalin thought later on in life. Did he go, oh, jeepers, I made a lot of really big mistakes in life, and I hope, I don't know, something I didn't look up. Um, but anyways, we see someone like Mike Tyson, even Hunter S. Thompson with his writing and gonzo journalism, became this sort of great guru who started a whole new line, a whole new movement of journalism. Um, Lily Wachowski, The Matrix, and he started a trilogy. I don't know if there's a trilogy theme that comes through here. A Trika theme, right? Anuttara Trika was what Laxman was all about. So maybe something there as well. Ted Turner. Oh yeah, I founded CNN, and then he went on TBS and TNT. Anyways, a lot of three-letter words, right? That's what I'm seeing there, and three groups of three-letter words you could say as well. So maybe there's some tr trika going on here we can find. So we got someone like Laxman Jew was talking about some of this Kali and Kaula Krama, and he was using drunkenness and sometimes sex as examples, and breaking a lot of probably really, really serious taboos of the time. We get someone like Lily was on Wachowski, who that's the one. The Matrix. She did The Matrix, which just blew everybody's minds to some degree. But then she came out as transgender again to really like just break all the taboos and break all of the old ways. And I don't know if there is some of that like that dissolution of the identity in Pisces and taking that very seriously. And well, that's what Lexman Jew is. That's what she was doing. That's what, in a sense, Ted Turner was dissolving a lot of like the independent news organization and starting to make these great big huge conglomerate broadcast networks, you could say. And anyway, so we have him in Pisces. I'm sure he network, I want to say Aquarius, so I'm sure he has something there too. But um like this, we get a blind jazz pianist, improviser. You know, how Ravati can we get working with the music, working with the poetry, taking these things very seriously, struggling a lot in early life, no doubt. Not an easy path to do that either. We got a couple midwives and gynecologists, or is that the same one that keeps coming up? I think there's two in here. Anyways, so we got a couple of them. We've got this Vin Diesel. We think of again, we take it to the home and a sense of like, even his movies sort of shows him having this sort of sense, although he kind of rises above the criminality of his movies, he sort of has a responsibility for all these kind of criminals and outcast sort of people. Really, Lex Manju was also bringing in foreigners and teaching them the most secret, sacred scriptures. I know Mark has talked to me about, well, talked to a lot of people about it. He warred with the Brahmins his whole life, warred against the orthodoxy that said, like, this knowledge can't go into the hands of foreigners. Um, and so this sort of struggles against all of that going on. We get a few, well, we get a lot of people like political theorists. We've got Trotsky, we had Engels, we had Washington, right? We got Brian Mulroney, who was sort of one of the new camps. There was a new, I was young in school. This was in the 80s, I think he came in. And we were already learning about like trickle down economics. And so that's a bit, I don't know, maybe where is he? And Revati, so maybe that's like the like a shower head, right? And things trickle down or something like that. We had again Marxist, Leninists. We had, if we go into the history, this was what was it, the like 1936 or something? And so if we look at Europe at the time, Hitler was just coming up to power, just to build up to World War II. These kinds of things were going on. Um, and so we see this really strong war between sort of the fascists and the communists, the right wingers and the left wingers. We see this anyways, and we see it in some of these characters as well. Brian Mulroney was considered, he got elected, but in those days he was considered so far to the right. It was just wild that he ever got elected. Now he'd be considered very moderate and very sort of tame man, but at the time it was like that. We see these big broadcasts as well. Like Ted Turner started with this news and CNN and this kind of things, and that's evolved into someone like Joe Rogan, who like gets as many people following his news as CNN gets these days. I don't know. I didn't check the numbers, but I'll bet you he's getting more, or it has at some points of his career. And so we get these kind of things. We get another quite a strong nationalist and soldier, a poet, And in those days, this was early. I think he was writing poetry in First World War and went into battle and wrote a bunch of beautiful poetry and walked into probably a machine gun nest or whatever the heck they were walking into in World War One. He didn't live very long, anyways. But that was a lot like sort of Joe Rogan and Ted Turner and these other broadcast poetry and this kind of nationalist sort of poetry and a lot of nationalist kind of sentiments as well going on in this Saturn and Pisces. Or I don't know if those national sentiments are changing or starting to take a new shape, perhaps, or being redefined, or something along those lines. Like now, if we think of something like Kashmiri Shaivism, it's almost become like part of, whereas India might have been quite ashamed of this for a lot of years, and it really, a lot of those tantric scriptures just didn't get published, probably because they were a bit ashamed and hid them and said, no, it is ready for that. And now India is becoming quite proud of Kashmiri Shaivism, and Trika comes from India, and all this tantra and all this wisdom, and right, they're bloated up like a bunch of bloated Brahmins um, over it all now, and it's quite it's interesting as well. Oh wow, what a world. I want to equate things that don't aren't really equal, but they are to another degree. Because I was just thinking, Mark Dyczkowski died in February. I don't know where Saturn was there, but it was very. If it wasn't in Pisces at that point, it very quickly came to Pisces, and then we have this sort of Charlie Kirk assassination, death, and and in a way there's a very similar thing because there's a lot of this old thing passed away, and there seems to have made a lot of space for the new. It's made a lot of energy to the new growth. And even the months after he passed away, I saw a lot of his students, I've talked about this before, publishing translations. And I know with myself, I haven't really been able to define it, but what I think it's come down to is a sense of responsibility towards his teachings and a sense of responsibility for the time that I got to spend with this man and a sense of responsibility for my teacher's wisdom and whatever has come before me. Now I'm feeling very responsible for that. So sort of a new level of responsibility for this, I don't know, maybe the hocus pocus of Pisces and taking it all very seriously. Like we do as Shaivists. And this is an interesting thing about Shaivists as well, because we're sort of like Tantra has this reputation of being very anyways, hocus pocus and all those tantrics and all this, a lot of the poetry is just getting drunk on Shiva-hood in a sense and losing our sense of reality to some degree. But in another sense, when you really like look at the lineage and you look at the, I don't know, at least our gurus in this sort of thing, the March Dyczkowskis and Swami Laxman Jews and these kind of people. Um, there's a very strong academic streak that doesn't get seen. And I think that's very similar with a lot of these people and these movements. And I think even like we think of Trotsky and we think of Engels and Washington and these things, these guys wrote like they signed constitutions. They signed these like first drafts of documents that are seen to be like Bibles, whether that's in politics or spirituality. And a lot of times they were just trying to deal with this paradox with these two opposing sides, whether it's communism and capitalism, whether it's orthodoxy and unorthodoxy, I guess heterodoxy, or whatever it is. And I don't know if some of that is starting to dissolve into this, and like the geochemists, it all becomes a little bit murky. And a lot of these geochemists are like, it was dream pills. It was like you take a couple tablets and you're kind of in dreamland. And well, this was also to kill the pain. Um, and so I don't know if there is some of that sort of like, I don't know, that's why we go on pilgrimage. That's why we seek God consciousness, because there's some pain, because it's not like, oh, what was it? The big yellow book from Bihar or big orange book from Bihar School of Yoga. If you're not happy 100% of the time, then you've got mental problems. And so that unhappiness is, I don't know, it's some residual pain that we have to look at somehow. The things that don't work out are these residual fantasies that, well, that had nothing to do with who we actually are. And so I guess we have to sort of, how did I describe it to somebody today? I described it sort of like when we're in this sun period and we're like, oh, wow, I know the truth. I'm here. I'm like, God, I'm an enlightened person. It's beautiful. God supports me. The universe supports me. Everything supports me. Life is just easy. It's wonderful. Well, that's way over on the other side of the zodiac by this point of Saturn's journey. And 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 we're kind of in a depressive state. We're a little bit sad. But that's also turning us sort of inward. It's turning us back towards the self, back towards the truth, and these kinds of things by this point of it now. Um, and we're moving out of that hell, and I don't know if there's some hope for the future coming through all of this. Hope for the individual, hope for the I don't know. Maybe it's like we look at someone like Ted Turner and Joe Rogan, hope that the individual can sort of sift through all this murkiness. There's a lot of there's a lot of propaganda in this through the transits and through all these writers, of course, right? Like, who have I been naming? Some of the greatest propagandists of all time as well. And so there is a lot of propaganda in this. And actually, like someone like Swami Laxmanju, he was quite political in his earlier days. And so I don't know if he's like went through all that propaganda and then wanted to get to the truth deeper and sort of solve that paradox of the two sides of the political spectrum. I don't know. That's what Joe Rogan sort of says he does, but he's also like the left still hates on him. So is he really do that, right? Anyways, all kinds of interesting stuff comes up. So yeah, Bill Cosby, he was the great father figure in some degree when he was quite young. So I don't know if that was a Saturn period that did that, but then now he's had to go away from everything in shame because he's been accused of sexual assault. His story is very mercury. Everybody sort of stopped, nobody talks about him. You don't hear his name much. But he like went to jail for sexual assault, and then I think he got out on some technicality or something. But anyways, it's all very murky. The whole story and what is the reality is very murky here. Even with Shaivism, and we're like, oh, magic is real, and it's like, well, what is the reality of that? Well, wonder and awe and being left speechless is very real, and that feels a lot like magic, and so at least that is real. I can vouch for that. Um, Mark Dyczkowski, anyways, I've been listening to some of his old lectures. Some friends sent me some of his stuff and like this. And it's very interesting to hear him really spell out loud. He says, what did he say? When it comes to spiritual powers, I have no more power than any of you here or away from here. And he was very clear on that because as a guru in India, especially in India, and especially working with magic mantras like he did, he got ascribed all kinds of special powers and wisdom. And he always said, oh, I can't initiate. He was initiated by his guru. I can't initiate. But again, the goddess could initiate people directly. What did he say in one of his classes? This is coming from way, way back. And he was talking about this and he said, but how did he put it? Oh, he says, I can't really initiate people. You need an enlightened master of the Tika line. And as far as he knew, since Swami Laxmanju, there were no enlightened masters of the Shiva line. And so, like, where the heck are you going to get initiated? And so, I guess the goddess is going to have to initiate you herself. And he said, well, you would know this because blah, 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 whatever the goddess would just sort of let you know. So again, the reality of even something like initiation, this is just like pre-initiation in Revati anyways, because initiation is Aries, it's Ashwini, that you're initiated, go. And so this is sort of that initiation is sort of being dissolved at this point. And I think what also sort of happens along the spiritual lines is a lot of New Age spiritualities, sort of the ones that maybe aren't connected with truth start to fade away to some degree. The ones that don't have, I don't know. It's a bit all cultish here, so maybe it needs that charismatic leader to pull everyone forward. Because there's a bunch of propaganda. So what is real and what is not real is really like nobody knows anymore. Like you don't have a clue what you're looking at. Every bit of news, like I see something that says like breaking news, and I don't know how many times this week where I've thought like I just thought it was like some AI sort of breaking news thing. It wasn't even real. And then a few days later, it comes on like a news feed that I trust to actually give reality. And I'm like, oh, geez, that actually happened, you know? And so Saturn's really playing in that dream fantasy land here on everybody right now. So Dostoevsky, some great writers, great literature. I think Harry Potter was first published in this transit. Really amazing writers. It makes me, I'm like, oh, geez, you got to get on it, Mike. This is a great time. This is perfect time for me to sort of, anyways, publish something seriously, or anyone to, right? So if you're on it, like you've got until Saturn is Revati, basically, right? Is wonderful time for some of the greatest literary works. Even the songwriters, Gordon Lightfoot, he's considered one of the best songwriters in Canada, one of the best songwriters of all time. Kenny Rogers is Gambler. Everybody knows like the lyrics to Kenny Rogers songs, at least from my generation. I could sing it all to you right now. I won't. God help you. Um, but some of it was interesting. Like Kenny Rogers, it was this, one of his songs was The Coward of the County. And so this guy, he sort of, I don't know, his daddy got in trouble with the law for fighting or something. And so he promised his dad he would never do this. And so he got picked on and he was the coward of the county and he got picked on and teased all the way through it. And then he got a girlfriend. One of the girls thought, oh, wow, this guy's amazing. And then she went out somewhere and a bunch of guys raped her. And the coward of the county, then he goes back and he beat the hell out of everybody, locks the door and just like beat the hell out of everybody. And so this sort of Kenny Rogers sort of had a he didn't beat the hell out of everybody, but he exposed some people that were sort of also not good to women, you can say, in Hollywood and the music industry at the time, and sort of faced a lot of flack on that sort of thing. And some say that's why he didn't stay an A-lister. He sort of got pushed back into B-list after his great gambler and coward of the county stuff. So this sort of dreams and realities, and I like that resentment of the song, like that holding back and like this. And I don't know if there's a sense of like maybe a sense of like storing power and storing energy somehow. Makes me think if there's batteries. I don't know if there's batteries. Certainly transmission of power is a very strong thing. But even some of these like Joe Rogan and some of these big guys through their workouts and they're trying to build their inner power, their inner strength, at least on a physical level, right? Someone like Swami Lakshmanju is going to the deepest level of that. Um, yeah, some of these, yeah. There's a lot of tough relationships here. Natalie Wood, she was mysteriously drowned, killed in Hollywood. Can't remember the name of the actor who reportedly. Anyways, there's a book. I think there's a movie, something like that. So killed quite young. Some say she knew other things, other secrets and things like this in Hollywood. Things like that. Oh, we have Malia Yousafzai and another couple activists have this. Again, I think it's that great sense of compassion that sort of goes out to some degree with these. And then as I say that, I land on Gavin Newsom and Saddam Hussein. But Saddam Hussein, there's very different and very polarized news on him. Jean Cabot, you might say as well. There's very different polarized news. It's interesting. Jean Cabot died in the tourist thing. Saddam Hussein was killed. Luigi Calabresi was a police commissioner who was assassinated as well. So it's interesting. You get some of these people, a couple of people with the same similar positions who were assassinated. There's a lot of assassination in Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada all through history. There has been, I think, if I'm not correct, JFK was one of them, but there was a whole bunch of them assassinated in this period. And so it's no surprise to see some of that. Again, I think it's that some of that, like doing away with old movements, doing away with movements that have sort of passed their time. I was going to compare a couple deaths as well, and this is a sense of like it brings an energy of revival, right? Of being able to see those old things in a new way. And one of the things, again, the similarity between Mark Dachkowski and this political pundit is there's this revival of faith. A lot of people are feeling a very strong pull towards those old beliefs or those what's Saturn doing? Um, kind of bringing on a sense of revival of spiritual energy, I guess you could say. So even someone like Wailing Jennings became again this wise old man of outlaw country. These sorts of things. Frida Kahlo, the wise old lady, surrealists working with magical realities and these sorts of things, and a lot of taboo sort of topics as well. Kurt Cobain, of course, dove into all that stuff. Even Julia Roberts, she did as well, but sort of in the sense of like playing a prostitute and things like that. Um, which she was a very elegant prostitute, but anyways, she played those kind of roles. Will Smith, his famous slap in Hollywood, pushed him to the outsider right away, sort of outside of his community. Now he's set back. Now he's ending his Men in Black and things like that, which was also kind of setting them back. Saturn's very Man in Black energy. Again, I think that sort of relates with this. I said very early, who was it? James Bond and Mission Impossible and some of these sort of guys working like black ops to a certain degree. Even the Pinkerton investigation working kind of a black ops. Saddam Hussein, all these dictators all had their black ops kind of police. Let's let's jump across. We did what we could on the on the natal charts there. We'll come to the history of Saturn and Uttara Bhadrapada. Dana, you got any questions or comments in this point? Anything anything come to your mind as I've chatted all this?
I was thinking about Saturn in Pisces, I can't think. Taking seriously the magic, the dream world, and it made sense, like in a psychological level. For example, you said that there's a lot of nationalisms, right, in a period of time, but it's a paradox because it's normally from people that feel isolated and they don't pertain to something. So it's like they put the energy into, I want to believe that I pertain to this country or this group of people like Hell's Angels, or to like projecting on purpose what they know is not true. So
Yes.
they take seriously their own illusion, but it's Saturn. They cannot lie to themselves. So there's something there.
Yeah, that's very, very well put, actually. Yeah. They're seeking a sense of false belonging. To some degree, or making the outsiders feel belonging, or just because you've done some taboo things doesn't mean you have to stay out. And so they make their own, it's almost like a little microcosm of reality that they sort of create for themselves by banding together. And because I see a lot of this wave energy coming through this great flood kind of energy. And so something like the Hells Angels, it might be okay, you've got one disaffected person, but now he starts to gather up people who also feel like outsiders and they don't belong. And so, like you say, they make a sense of belonging through nationalism, through a creed, maybe through a manifesto kind of thing as well. Um, and maybe even like I get a sense with all these killers, like right away they're saying, oh, they fit them into these boxes. Oh, it was a left-wing extremist. But then things start trickling out, and the person didn't really belong to the left or the right either. And they sort of just get pushed into that box of, oh, they're that person. Even though every individual is nuanced, but in Pisces is missing all of that nuance. Um, we think of that outsider energy in American politics, the crackdown on ICE and the crackdown on refugees, and just like throwing people out and making these sort of outsiders. Now you've got these groups of outsiders who are becoming quite strong as well and getting some power, um, like this. So it's very interesting that way. It's interesting. I come to Uttara Bhadrapada and we're seeing Fantastic Four. Again, these sort of mythologies of the imagination that we're now able to bring to life because of new technologies. And this was a little bit
Sorry, Mike. I don't know if you are wanting to share the historical document because I still have the charts here, the other one.
perfect. Thanks for catching that.
You're
Yeah,
welcome.
I forget sometimes here we go. So now I think you see the Fantastic Four. So we saw a lot of these. I talked about a lot of the literature, sort of building these realities, new realities, and things like this. But then we get into the film and things like these Fantastic Four. There's a lot of Saturn here seems to be doing a lot of myth building, right? And that's that sense of nationalism that builds a new myth, a new paradigm, and things like this start to come out. We get a lot of these, we're seeing a lot of these superhero things. Well, I don't know what's going on with modern superhero movies, but I know the early superhero movies were nothing but really pure propaganda movies and really preparing people for war and preparing people for conflict. And I think to some degree there is some of that going on when Saturn is going through Pisces because he still sees Aries coming up, right? He still sees this kind of battleground that is coming up. And so there's a lot of sort of like steps, pre-steps to war. I saw in the history a lot of like kind of ceasefires, but not really ceasefires. Um, a lot of these kind of things happening in the air, kind of like what's going on in Russia, Ukraine right now as well. We start to see a lot of massacres, a lot of like, and maybe the massacres have already happened, but they start to come to light in this period. Again, we saw some of the dictators that had it in their positions, right, are involved with massive amounts of death. Um, and so we see a lot of that kind of coming up. Even if we look at these movies, to some degrees, they are preparing us for massacres. They're preparing us to dehumanize an opponent, right? And that's what a lot of it does, is it sort of um, these movies, it gives us an opponent that, oh, of course, we're fully allowed to kill that person because they're not really human or whatever, these kind of things. Of course, through here we saw the midwives and things like this, so probably a lot more talk and a lot more issues about abortion and what's going on in the womb, you could say, becomes a very serious issue. Of course, like all those midwives, some of them were famous for traveling around and talking about birth control and all of these kind of things in early times. And of course, it was very taboo as much as, what is it, Planned Parenthood, I think they have in the USA. Anyways, that really just they talk about what's going on in the womb. So that kind of thing. It's funny, we see these sort of cosmic entities as well. These things were cosmic rain, these kind of, I don't know, even like mutations from the heavens, you might say. I think this might feed into some of the nuclear science, some of the quantum physics sort of thinking, being able to like be two things at once and just really trying to dealing with that paradox. So more Marvel, something like Minecraft, dealing a little bit with what's going on in the beginning. Here's the Mission Impossible stuff. These are some notes. I've got someone kind of helping me on this a little bit, so we got a few notes. Um, yeah, we got all this nowadays, right? We've got all the Epstein stuff going on. Here, it's funny, Charlie Kirk was mentioned before. Yeah, that kind of there's some of that difference, some of that golf, I think. The Saturn also aspects from here, he aspects Taurus. I think that's a lot of the free speech stuff that starts to come up in here. And speech does start to probably get restricted in here. Certainly a lot of the dictators that we saw on the list favored some speech over others, we'll say. Um, this talk of autism is coming up, all this stuff about the vaccine. It's very interesting to have in the Trump administration and the American administration now, it's like all the conspiracy theorists are in politics. Now it's like all these things are just being taken seriously. And even like I'm half conspiracy theorist myself, right? But I'm kind of like, is this for real? Like I don't know what to think. Dolly, the sheep, the clone sheep, she came about through one of these transits. So like it's like, really, is this stuff for real? Tomb Raider, Diablo, a lot of things. Fight Club came out in this period, all this dream reality stuff. Oh, what is it? Gabriela Garcia Marquez, Thousand Years of Solitude, I think it was. Um, So really some dreamy stuff where you really neverwhere is a good word for this because it's like, well, neverwhere, right? Um, but a lot of these things like Tomb Raider, Diablo, these got accused also of like life imitating art. And they're like, oh, these things are all bad. These dreams are bad because people imitate them and kill people. You got something there?
I just realized like the genre of writing that Gabriel Garcia Marquez and other people like Isabel Allende, it's called in Spanish realismo mágico, magical realism.
Yes,
So that is like I think a perfect sentence for Saturn and Pisces.
it's perfect. It is 100% magical realism. Yeah. And it describes the spiritual side all the way to the dictator side, right? Because they're also trying to like poof, just make things good, make things how they see them. Um, God of Small Things there. Green Mile came out. Some really, again, that magical realism becomes very, very strong here. Voodoo. I think to some degree, even if we look at like, I think it was 1903. I'm not going to get through all this thing. I think it was around 1903 or 1906 or in early times. And even this sort of spread of rail lines, the spread of electricity when they started putting up street lights at night, and things like this, was also for a lot of people at that time was a magical realism. They were bringing magic into reality. Like, wow. Um, just amazing, amazing stuff. So even the science of this period is very magical kind of realism. Elon Musk is like one of the top scientists of this era. And he's like, oh, we're going to be going to Mars next month. And some people are laughing at him, going like, dude, we didn't even actually go to the moon. But he seems to be like, that's how far we are, right? It's like, what is real? I don't even know anymore. Um, it's even, even getting my visa for India and thinking anyways, or leading the world. the world, leading my 10 friends to think that I was that I was banned from India. But I think actually I wasn't banned from India at all. It was just like when I applied last time, Canada was on the blacklist, and so they sort of sent me on the sort of runaround. And so a lot of it was just due to my own travel and my own sort of thing in my own mind. And to be honest with you, like I kind of knew that in the beginning as well, but I was busy with other things. Um, so it's funny now it sort of comes around to what the real reality is, right? And so and so I didn't go to India for 3 years because I quite literally made my own reality and lived according to that. And hey, I had fun, man. Like don't put it down. There's nothing wrong with magical realism. It was good. It was good times. Um, but but that's where we are now. Um, I think we see the My Lai massacre in Vietnam all of a sudden happening here too. So we see all that kind of thing. But I think magical realism, and I think we're let's just wrap this up. Let's just put the stamp of magical realism on this and feel like we got away with something. I think wow, I don't know if I can remember any of it, but this has been a really good course. I know every class I learned something. It was so like it was incredible. It was a beautiful thing. And I thank you for like, geez, the fortitude of coming to all of these classes, Dana. I really, really appreciate
Thank you so much. I feel like it's a personal class for me. I learned a lot, and I know if we wrap it up now, it's perfect because we are living in the Saturn and Pisces times right now. So I think we will just
Yeah,
know about it in 2028.
exactly. We'll just let this whole project dissolve into the soup of our great wisdom. And when we need it, it will be there. And
It
we'll
will be there. I really trust it.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Mike. It has been like a super journey. Like you say, I don't know what I remember, but when you need it, it comes. Even when I do readings or when I do my own studies, suddenly I remember something you said or something we commented, so we know the information is there.
Yeah.
And I'll see you soon anyways for the next course in
Yeah,
November.
yeah. Which one are you coming to the
The Ayurveda, I think it's
Ayurveda
Ayurveda, the
one?
27 days. And then I think next year it's the 27 months. I'll
Yeah.
be doing those.
Yeah, those will be, yeah, that's going to be my new long-term
Your
strategy.
new project. Yeah.
One of the things that didn't work with this, and Saturn deals with some of this, right? One of the things that didn't work with this for me was doing it by sign because it didn't allow me to deal with the nakshatras properly.
Yeah.
And so I just want to get into really isolating the nakshatras. What is the difference between this and that? And then hopefully we can start getting into padas and just go
It's
crazy.
never ending.
So yeah, so wonderful. I'll see you
Thank you.
soon.
Thank you so much, Mike. Have a good travels.